In the opening scene of the film, we meet the hairdresser Izzy Gentile, loved by all. It turns out that she likes children and usually buys sweets from them. She goes to buy newspapers as usual and is surprised by a picture of a prince on the front page with the news that he will soon visit the city where she lives, and she laughs at her hairstyle. She goes to her hair salon a few steps away, notices smoke around the place, discovers that a fire has broken out in the hair salon because of the operation of the microwave oven. She scolds her employees for their carelessness and lack of care in complying with workplace safety rules. The accident will cost him a lot of money to fix the living room. The saloon owner's representative comes and tells them that he has already warned them not to use too many electrical appliances at once and that what happened will make the owner angry. Izzy did not find a replacement and gave him $2,000 in compensation for the losses. The representative then walks away, his employees cry knowing that the money should fulfill his dream of traveling the world. In the next scene, Thomas the Vanilla Prince, whose photo we saw together on the front page of the newspaper appears. The prince is preparing to meet the country's king, but it seems he doesn't like the way he looks. The prince asks his assistant Walter to make an appointment immediately for a haircut. Walter mistakenly calls Izzy's salon and asks him to go to the hotel where the prince is staying. Izzy is suspicious of it, thinking at first glance that it's just a joke from a friend of hers. She goes through the list of numbers and discovers that the caller is an international number and has been reassured that he is indeed the prince's assistant. She tells her employees the news and asks them to help her choose the clothes in which she will meet the prince. She's getting ready and heading to the hotel. When she arrives, Walter greets her and escorts her to the prince's room. Izzy is impressed by the luxury of the room but says she likes it a lot. She meets the prince and bows down to greet him in the royal manner. He wonders how she mastered it and asks how she learned it, and she replies that she read it on the way to the hotel. At first glance in his eyes, the prince admires her beauty and is attracted to her. He asks her to start working. Suddenly the prince's assistant enters with a maid carrying tea. When the prince says he didn't ask, the assistant gets excited and yells at the maid, who gets confused and drops the tea on the floor. Izzy runs towards her to help her and then comes back angrily to finish the prince's haircut. She asked him why he didn't stop his assistant from abusing the maid. He says he can't. Izzy gets angry and then refuses to finish his work and leaves the hotel. As soon as she arrived, she told her employees what happened and how the prince did not defend the oppressed maid. In the middle of the conversation, Tom walks in, apologizes to her and asks her to finish her haircut. Izzy accepts and starts working. Meanwhile, the staff are trying to entertain the prince, which impresses him. Izzy finishes his work and Tom admires his new haircut. They go out and ask him to accompany him on the subway. On their way, Izzy notices a luxury car following them and asks the prince, who replies that it is in the royal protocol. Thomas tells her that her assistant called him by mistake and she replies, so she can provide the same high-quality services at a lower price. The prince expresses his happiness with the mistake made by Walter. He asked her to accompany him to his hairdresser, but she refused to justify wanting to walk and admire the night stars. She holds her hand and points to the stars she loves. Thomas thanked her and told her that he was happy to know her. She in turn says he is a wonderful and kind person when he forgets he is a prince and behaves normally. The next day, Thomas met his fiancée Lorraine and her mother, and they discussed who would do the hairdressing during the wedding. Walter offers them Izzy's living room and says he's very famous. Everyone agrees with his proposal. Walter goes to meet Izzy and tells him that they are invited to do hairstyling for all members of the royal family at the prince's wedding. Izzy's mother opposes her daughter traveling and leaving the hair salon. But she and her assistant tell her that they will receive $50,000, which is a very significant amount for them. They arrive at the palace and are greeted by the prince, who presents them to his father and mother-in-law. Walter walks them to their room and introduces them to another assistant named Petra. Walter accompanies Izzy to his room, which the prince allocates to him. In the next scene, Thomas tells his family that he wants to organize a simple wedding and save costs for the locals. His father replies that he should be happy to marry his beloved, but Thomas says that the wedding is planned and that he is not the one who chose his Lorraine fiancée. Meanwhile, Fabert asks to meet Izzy and her companions and tests their makeup skills. Izzy managed to impress him, but his colleagues did not follow his path. Mrs. Fabert is responsible for the hairstyles and makeup of the members of the royal family. In the next scene, Izzy walks around the city and talks to her mother to show her the beauty of the place, then buys sweets as usual and distributes them to staff. When she meets Thomas and his fiancée, she asks him how many employees he has to distribute sweets to them. She's surprised when he tells her he has no knowledge of this. In the evening, Izzy leaves the mansion to have fun outside, just like she did in New York. Walter meets her and tells her it's dangerous to go out alone at night, but she refuses to listen to her advice and leaves. Walter goes to the prince and tries to understand what happened and also asks him to go out with her and enjoy her time away from the protocols at the palace. Tom accepts and catches up with her after dressing casually. Izzy then takes her to a slum. There, they start dancing together with simple people. Under the light of the stars, they tell each other the story of their lives, and Thomas thanks her for the wonderful moments they spent together. On his way to the palace, he talks about helping the poor in his country and how they should take responsibility for his people and help them improve their situation. The next morning, Thomas asked his father about his plan to help the slum dwellers, and his father replied that Lorraine's father would buy his quarters and renovate them, and then asked his son to focus only on his marriage. In the next scene in the palace garden, the newlyweds repeat the wedding ceremony. Tom watches Izzy come out of the mansion. Outside, Izzy distributes prints to give to orphaned and poor children. When she returns, she asks the maid to help her prepare food for the children in the slum. The scene moves to the prince and his fiancée, who reveals his plans to create a special store selling dog supplies. Thomas insinuates that Izzy speaks to the guardian, then discovers the project to raise funds for poor children and decides to participate. While he is speaking, Lorraine speaks with her mother, who seems to be annoyed by their relationships. We find that Lorraine in turn doesn't like Thomas and prefers to start her own business rather than the bride. Her mother opposes it and says she will soon become a princess. Thomas drives an ordinary car and goes with Izzy, makes a donation to the children of the slum. On the way they talk about their childhood and we discover that Tom was never allowed by his father to do the things he wanted. Unlike Izzy, who tells her about her adventures with her late father. He accompanied her to eat ice cream and rode a horse. In the slum, children receive them with great happiness. While Tom hands out gifts to them, Izzy does hair styling for some of them. Lorraine's mother would follow them and hide to watch what they were doing from afar and then take a close-up photo of them. The next day, the photo spreads in the newspapers and everyone in the palace talks about it. The photo reaches the king and his wife, who asks Walter to burn all copies of the newspaper and expel Izzy and his companions. Lorraine's parents are arriving and are distraught by what happened. The king assures them that this is just a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, the prince is looking for Izzy until he finds her getting ready to leave. He begged her to stay in the palace, but she refused and left crying. Thomas goes back to the palace and tells his father that he will cancel the marriage, but his father tells him that it is simply impossible to do it because he has gone bankrupt and needs the money of Lorraine's family. Thomas is obliged to equip himself and prepare for the wedding, but his assistant Walter asks him not to do so, and not to marry without love. The prince thanks him for his advice, goes to speak to Lorraine and convinces her that they do not like her and wants to cancel the wedding. He is surprised when she reveals to him that she in turn does not want to marry him. The prince goes away happy. Izzy returns to New York and finds that the hairdresser burned down completely and then goes to see her mother. The saloon owner's representative comes to ask for money, but she surprises him when she realizes that he kept the money for himself and did not give it to the salon owner. Izzy surprises her mother that she will give up her job as a hairdresser and go to work in retirement homes. In the last scene of the film, Izzy goes out on the balcony to get some fresh air. She is surprised by the prince riding his horse. He confesses their love for each other and decides to live together for the rest of their lives.